Hello, I'm Sarah Carpenter of Oakland Council, a TV show from Studio to Be about Oakland's journalism, government, and activism. I'm here to tell you about Studio to Be. It's a home for journalists, producers, and community engagement with offices in Oakland, Fresno, and Seattle. Studio to Be is a labor of love and an act of resilience all rolled into one. It's a content development and production studio, as well as a collaborative community where stories that can change the world find support, resources, and distribution. If you have a new story idea or just need a place to camp while working on the next big thing, visit Studio to Be's website and drop us a line at info@studiotobe.com. That's info@studiotobe.com. More locations coming soon. Maybe Berlin? And if you feel like your community needs one, let us know. And now, here's Beats and Measures.
From Studio to Be.
This is Beats and Measures.
When the sun goes down, this is a party time.
Everybody seems so happy. Just fun.
Restaurants, the movie theater, everything.
Every other block there was music going on.
These two are old friends.
My name is John Henry Brown.
My name is Dickie Lacey.
They grew up in West Oakland, California.
Oh, heck yeah.
They're talking about 7th Street, West Oakland's main drag. John and Dickie remember how 7th took hold of them in the late 1950s and wouldn't let go.
The lure for me was when we used to drive through there to get to church. And I would see 7th Street when we go home. I gotta find my way down here.
Dickie found his way there with his older brother.
I can remember going down there at night with him. And I'm like, what, 7 or 8 years old.
Pretty young for what's going down on that strip.
And I can remember a guy giving me some money to go get some cigarettes. A runner, they call him now.
He means a kid who a grown-up pays to get cigarettes or something to eat or other stuff.
I can remember a guy down there on 7th Street with his coat. You'd open the coat and he has a bunch of pints and stuff you could buy.
They compare it to the
Las Vegas Strip. Everything was lit up and people everywhere.
People just running into you up and down the street.
Like congested, very congested, all night long.
You can go into any club and party.
And everywhere you turn, there were cars going up Cadillacs. You had all of these gamblers down
You
there.
go down 7th Street and do your business, whatever you're gonna do.
People selling all kind of things. You know, their bodies, drugs, anything you can name.
And beautiful women.
I didn't know what 10 and 2 was. You know, this guy would be like a barker. You would see 10 and 2, 10 and 2.
John finds out what 10 and 2 means when he's 15, and he steals his dad's truck
In the middle of the night,
and drives to where the action is.
I got to 7th Street and I was saying, my God, I'm here. And I'm looking around and all of a sudden the truck door opens and this woman said, 10 and 2. She was beautiful.
And then I found out later, 10 for the woman, 2 for the room.
These women get paid by the hour.
So I'm down here in the stolen truck. I don't know that I'm signaling a trick. I'm just trying to see what's going on, right? And she looked at me like, well, don't stop on the corner if you don't want nothing.
John scrams.
And I said, oh, I got to come back.
That was a normal night on 7th Street.
All this was exciting to me as a young boy. You know, wow, look at these guys in these big cars and these fancy women and all these clubs and the music, and it was restaurants.
These days,
Everywhere.
all that's gone.
Saturday night on 7th is pretty boring.
So, what happened? Hey guys, I'm Chloe Behrens.
And I'm Brian Howie.
This is Beats and Measures, a series that explores how music shapes people and people shape history.
In each episode, we'll examine a person, a a culture, or a whole group through the lens of music.
Today, we'll focus on music from the neighborhood we call home.
The West Oakland Blues.
Shout out to another awesome show from Studio to Be. It's called Cooking by Ear.
In each episode, Chef Cal Peternell brings on a guest, and they make a meal together. As you listen to some tasty conversation, you can also cook along in real time.
By the end of the episode, you're ready to eat. Where else could you listen to Frances McDormand talk about the occult and feminism and learn to make chicken stock?
You can hear Cooking by Ear's first season wherever you get your podcasts.
Here's a little taste of the show.
This is Cooking by Ear,
a podcast that teaches you how to cook.
All right, I'm going to admit something extremely embarrassing. I don't know how to crack an egg.
You already know. I'm Big Frida the Queen Diva, your best believer.
Like, everybody love my booty popping potatoes. I have to make this so much.
Oh, you'll appreciate the one line I couldn't get into Sideways, which is when people hold on to their wines too long, and the line is, nobody wants to fuck a 50-year-old virgin.
I'm sure there's like a whole group of people.
Yeah.
Right.
We live in the Bay Area, so there's something for everyone there. Yes.
Gotta keep practicing, baby. I just gave you the ingredients.
What's the word for the wandering white guy?
Mzungu tea.
Yeah, it's Mzungu.
It's Mzungu tea made in a Mzungu kitchen.
Put your hands on your knees and you arch your back. You put your booty in the air and you twerk like that. You gotta get lower though.
It's Cooking by Ear.
Cooking by ear. Well, it's a sensual experience. You got to use everything.
And now, back to the show.
All kinds of people are mixed up in West Oakland's long history. Here's the short version.
In the late 1800s, two booming industries, shipyards and railroads, draw in workers from around the country and the world.
That turns into a strategic advantage during World War II, when more people, many of them black Southerners, flood into the Bay Area.
Between the war decade and 1970, Oakland's African-American population multiplies nearly 15 times to over 124,000 people.
Dickie Lacey's family is part of that migration. His grandfather...
He was a Pullman porter from Waco, Texas.
Pullman porters serve passengers on trains.
And that's what a lot of black people back in the day were able to do. And he traveled a lot. So he wasn't there a lot. And that kind of put a rift between my grandmother and him. And my grandfather and my grandmother separated.
Dickie's grandmother moves to Richmond, California, north of Oakland, where she cooks and cleans in people's houses.
She's able to save up enough money to bring her 3 young daughters from Texas to California.
They were very involved in the church because my grandma was very religious. And she had them singing in the church as the Brooks Sisters, and they sung all around.
One of those sisters is Dickie's mother. After she has him, she moves the family to West Oakland in the early 1950s.
During all this, 7th Street is the hub of West Oakland. It's close to the port and the train yard where most of the neighborhood works.
After a long day, workers and military folk flood the restaurants and clubs on 7th for a drink and a show.
In them days, you had either a hot band or a hot jukebox.
This man remembers those times.
My name is Ronnie Stewart, Executive Director of the West Coast Blues Society.
Ronnie's a blues guitarist in Oakland. He grew up a couple blocks from 7th Street.
Ronnie checks out some of the fancier clubs there.
You had Slim Jenkins with napkins and tablecloths, great food, great waitresses. They all dressed in the same red and black.
And the juke joints.
Then you had old Miss Essie's place where they'd be sleep on the bar and drunk and puking on the table, and in other words, the high end to the raw.
Ronnie's dad gets him into the blues early on.
Father would come home drunk at 3 in the morning. And this is 1955, 56. And he said, "Hey, boy, put on Hallelujah." I said, "Daddy, that's that man with that old hoarse voice. I don't want to hear that." "Boy, you're going to love him one of these days." I said, "I don't know."
But Ronnie's dad needs a little help.
Things are 78s, and he's too drunk to put the needle on. They'd be scratching it. My mother said, "What?"
So he makes Ronnie do it for him. It isn't fun, but it pays. He gives Ronnie a nickel for each record he puts on.
By like 6 in the morning, I got a quarter. Woo! Man, that's all, a quarter? I go buy like 4 or 5 candy bars, and about 2 hours later, I'd be puking.
Dickie's mom schools him and his brother, too.
And she always always brought music in the house. Always encouraged us to know about cultural things. Always encouraged us to know about the history of our people.
She introduces Dickie to,
I would say, smorgasbord of music. She brought in Harry Belafonte, Jimmy Smith, Charlie Pride, Hank Williams, classical music, reggae music. And that's why I started wanting to play piano.
Dickie's mom notices his natural talent.
First I was doing Elvis Presley impersonation.
So she puts him in a talent show at one of Oakland's hottest juke joints.
It was at SSR Room. Yeah, on 7th Street.
Talent shows are hugely popular in the 50s and 60s.
That's how, we cut our teeth. Talent shows and recreation center dances.
Here's Oakland blues drummer, Larry Vann.
That's me.
Now, he teaches drum lessons and handles percussion and lead vocals in his own band. The talent shows offer opportunities for up-and-coming musicians like Larry.
That's how we got a chance to grow and develop, because we played behind 4 or 5 different acts. Hey man, will you guys play behind us? You play behind us? Sure, man. So we got a lot of playing time.
Here's John and Dickie again.
That was the highlight of our life. And I tell you the truth, be on a talent show.
Some musicians, like Larry, do pretty well for teenagers.
I was making $12 a night, but in the 60s, Monday morning, I have at least 24 bucks in my pocket. I could go to Flag Brothers and get me a pair of shoes for $9.99. I go to the shirt store down the street here, get me a shirt for $6. I still got some money, don't I?
And he gets to play the music he loves.
But mostly, John and Dickie do it for fun.
That wasn't about a record contract. That wasn't about trying to make money.
While John plays with groups on the Oakland talent show circuit, a teenage Dickie and his older brother formed their own band.
And we performed all the talent shows all over. My mother would be there. We had costumes. She would get them made for us.
They figure they can't miss with a name like
the MJBs, the Magnificent James Browns. Because we saw James Brown at the Oakland Auditorium, and we wanted to be James Brown.
Despite a killer name and on-point routine, they face stiff competition from a little kid.
Little Dion. I forgot about that. I forgot about little Dion.
He trumps everybody.
Yeah, he seemed like he won every talent show.
Everyone. Everything looked good. We on the show. Everything looks good. And then here he comes. Because you know he gonna win.
It was rigged.
Little Dion ends up on American Bandstand and even opens up a few shows for John and Dickie's idol.
This little 5-6-year-old kid came, and he wasn't that talented to me.
You sound a little bitter.
He came out. Yeah, we all bitter. We all bitter.
For this episode, just about everyone we talk with mentions James Brown. To them, he walks on water.
Please, please, please. James Brown? I thought we were talking about the Oakland Blues. James Brown is more funk than blues, right?
Well, Dickie's playing talent shows in the 60s. But before then, blues musicians come to Oakland and set the stage for the James Brown wannabes who perform at these talent shows.
And that's the sound we need to pin down.
It was a tough down-home blues.
Chris tells us how it all began.
My name is Chris Strockwitz, and I used to run our Hooley Records, and I've lived in the Bay Area now since 1953 actually.
His label recorded tough down-home music from Louisiana to Mexico to West Oakland.
They were playing really low-down Texas blues, the penitentiary blues. Whoa, man, she didn't do me good no more. That's really slow blues.
Chris says the roots of the Oakland blues scene lie in the South.
Not only blues, but just spirituals too. That goes hand in hand.
In the 40s and early 50s, musicians who come from the South combined down-home blues with gospel to create a slow, dragging sound that includes haunting vocal harmonies.
Just like other blues, These lyrics are about hard times and heartbreak, the musicians scraping for money, respect, love. They're basically talking about their lives through a song.
This is I'm Just a Stranger Here by Bob Geddon's Cavaliers in 1948.
Bob Geddon's is a name you'll want to remember.
I'm going back home. If I wear 99 pair shoes, well, I'm going back home. If I wear 99 pair shoes, then I know I'll be welcome and I won't have to sing these blues.
The notion of going back home if I wear 99 pair of shoes shows up in a bunch of blues and old-timey songs. It's this homesickness so strong, the singer's going to walk all the way back home, even if he has to wear out dozens of pairs of shoes.
The lyrics reflect the feeling that many black migrants experience, hoping to escape discrimination. But when they travel to Oakland from the South, the truth slaps them hard.
It was very segregated.
It may not be law in California, but it's just as real.
Well, I'm so tired of the cry. I could lay right down and die.
The West Coast sound is an offshoot of Texas blues. African-American laborers from the Lone Star State start singing their blues at the turn of the last century.
And when they bring it to California, it gets mixed up with a few other genres. Here's Ronnie Stewart again.
West Coast blues is a mixture of Texas, Oklahoma, some parts of Louisiana, and a little bit of Mississippi Delta.
Gospel and guitar influence the Texas blues style. Louisiana style combines Dixieland jazz with Caribbean rhythms, piano, and horns.
And these musicians would come together and they'd say, well, play a Mississippi shuffle. Now horns, play that jazz line to that big band sound. And then they say, oh, country boy, you gotta learn some 9th chords and some 13th chords. Can't be playing up here, it ain't gonna fit.
On top of all that, West Coast blues adds smooth and silky vocals, like Charles Brown does in Trouble Blues.
Someday, my darling, I won't be trouble no more.
Then, in the 50s, music changes. Musicians start amplifying their instruments, especially their guitars. And then the blues goes and has a really popular baby.
And they don't give a hoop about no police.
By the mid-1950s, rock and roll is everywhere. Oakland blues players, like other musicians, whip that sound into their mix.
Horn sections replace the vocal harmonies. The guitar rhythms get quicker.
Combine that with Mississippi shuffles, jazzy 9th and 13th chords, and Dixieland horns, and you get a West Oakland sound like Lowell Fulson's Black Knights.
When you see my face, you will smile.
And that's Oakland blues.
Chris doesn't agree.
I don't think this area ever had a unique sound of any kind, because Oakland blues, if there is such a thing, it would be these rhythm and blues and later soul bands, who grew out of McClyman High School.
That's in West Oakland.
Or some of the schools that most of the African American kids went to, who got much more formal education than the guys that actually started to play blues here.
In other words, it's hard to pin down the birth of these blues. To Chris, they're just part of what's trending when musicians move from the South to the Bay.
They brought the sounds with them from back home. That's why it's called down home blues.
Whatever you call it, the music has a huge influence on the people who grow up in Oakland during the 50s and 60s.
And that sound traces back to one man. Hey everyone, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about an important local resource. Bay Area Women Against Rape, or BAYWAR, is one of the first rape crisis centers in the country. For over 45 years, BAYWAR has provided services for anyone who has been affected by sexual violence.
BAYWAR operates a 24/7 crisis line and does 24/7 accompaniments for sexual assault reports. They also offer youth services and specific programs for the LGBTQIA and Latinx communities.
In addition to immediate support in the aftermath of a sexual assault, BAYWAR also provides individual and group counseling at no charge.
Sexual assault advocates are trained and state certified to provide emotional support, advocacy, and resources.
BAYWAR has no agenda for the next step after a sexual assault. Only an advocate to be on your side and provide options for you to make the decision.
If you or someone you know needs support, call the 24/7 crisis line at 510-845-7273. That's 510-845-7273.
If you're interested in volunteering or donating to BAYWAR, or want them to host a sexual violence training seminar, please visit the BAYWAR website at baywar.org for more information. That's BAWAR.org.
And now, back to the show.
Seem like the buses done stop running. You know the trains don't allow me to ride no more.
A freight train brings the blues to Oakland, with this man's father on board.
He told me he was 17, 18 years old.
This is Bob Geddens Jr.
Robert Lee Geddens, I guess, Jr.
His father was Robert Lee Geddens, Bob Sr.
He said he always liked the blues sound, and so he decided, him and a friend, to go to California. They jumped on a freight train, he said, from Texas.
That train takes them as far as Arizona. When it turns the wrong way, the two jump off, and they figure they'll walk, until, along the highway, Bob Sr. and his friend see a long line of shiny, idling cars.
Either A model or T model Ford. Guy had about 10 of them. The man had a bunch of drivers who was driving the things all off the road. They didn't know how to drive.
Bob Sr. sees his chance.
The guy asked him if he knew how to drive, and he told him yeah.
And he drives one of those cars from Arizona to Los Angeles. He settles there. In the 1930s, LA is the land of movie stars and music industry giants, and he wants to make it as a screenwriter. He even writes a script for
a black gangster movie.
By then, Bob Sr. has a wife and a family. But when Bob Jr. is a baby, his father's Hollywood hopes go up in flames.
And evidently our apartment caught a fire there where we was living, and it burned his manuscript up, and he didn't have but one. It just kind of really broke his heart, you know what I mean? He put the time into the description, didn't have no copies. After he lost his manuscript, he was through with LA. He came to Oakland where his mom was.
Bob Geddens Jr. is a young boy when his family moves to West Oakland during World War II.
I used to go down on 7th Street as a kid, and with all the military people down there, them soldiers had to keep their shoes and stuff clean. So every time my dad had a record shop or a recording studio down there, I'd be out there shining shoes and make all kind of money off them soldiers.
Bob's father works as a handyman, helping people install refrigerators and fix up their houses. The whole time he keeps loving and writing his kind of music.
My mom used to get mad at him and say, Don't you know no other kind of song to write other than blues? He'd be walking around humming blues all day long.
His ears tell him that 7th Street club owners and customers like the blues too.
He started his music career at that point.
Bob Sr. knows enough about electronics to set up a home studio in his mom's basement. Recording is a drag.
They had metal discs then, no tape recorders.
Every take has to be perfect.
Wasn't no going back and going over it again, you know what I'm saying?
It takes a minute to get it right.
It wasn't nothing to be in there 16 hours, 20 hours, trying to make just one side of a song. I hate to even think about that.
Regardless, Bob Sr. starts recording the locals.
He would have little folks sitting up in front of the mic.
Before Folsom makes it big with a bunch of Billboard hits, he has to deal with Bob Sr.
And every time Lord Fulton would make a mistake, he'd have to take that disc up and bend it and throw it in the garbage can, and he had a little funny frown. Man, you messing up now, and I'm throwing my money in the garbage can. Boy, he was funny then, boy. I'm not kidding.
Most musicians Bob Sr. records aren't famous when they first play in his studio. Here's Chris again.
He started recording the people who had drifted out here during the war, most of them.
Bob Sr. is a mentor to Chris.
There were a number of people who got into this game, but Bob Geddens was really totally devoted to recording, and he taught me a lot.
He even sticks his neck out for some musicians.
I visited him. He said, "Come on, let me play you something." Of course, the first notes I heard, this was Big Joe Williams, you know, the guy who wrote Baby Please Don't Go. I said, "Bob, where did you go? Did you go to Chicago to record him?" And no, Chris, he's right here in Oakland. I just went his bail. They locked him up in jail because he pulled a knife on some woman.
Bob Sr. records other famous musicians, like Jimmy McCracklin.
Bad luck is trouble.
And Sugar Pie DeSanto.
Please don't start no stuff, cause I don't wanna get rough, I wanna know.
Bob Sr. taps into his son's musical talent, too.
There was in the studio, he called me and he said, "Sit down there and see if you can make me up a beat."
So he lays down some piano tracks.
I started playing and I like that.
And Bob Jr.'s part makes it on Johnny Fuller's Haunted House.
I just moved in my new house today. Moving was rough, but I got squared away.
He's 21 years old. For his part in the composition, he gets $28.
The man gave me a big old check. I said, "I'm going home and I'm gonna play me a piano."
Bob Jr. heads to the local music shop, but the owner doesn't have any $28 pianos.
The only thing I got for $28 is an organ.
Bob is not happy.
Man, I don't want no funeral instrument. That's all I can give you. So I took it. It was a little single manual organ.
His father enforces a pretty strict practice schedule.
I'd spend the night in the studio trying to learn how to play that thing. My dad used to lock me up in there.
He would lock you in there trying to get you to learn how to play the organ?
Yeah, I'd stay all night. Me and that little organ.
Meanwhile, Bob Sr. keeps improving his home studio. He takes classes in electronics at a community college.
I think the reason for it was to get involved with recording more, you know.
But he doesn't have total control of the process. He sends his master discs to a factory in Los Angeles, where he suspects the crew's taking advantage of him.
And he know that they were stealing records.
So he drives to LA, walks up to the owner, and says,
"Man, can I go through your plant?" "Yeah." He said, "Let me have a piece of paper and a pencil." And he went through that man's plant and drew every one of them pipes.
Bob Sr. returns to Oakland with his hand-drawn plans and makes his son help him build his own record-pressing plant.
You know, you had to have hot water coming into a steam table and 2 presses, cold water return, oil pressure, steam pressure. And I seen pipes in my sleep.
Once he gains total control of recording, pressing, and promoting his records, Bob Sr. has do-it-yourself covered.
He and the family load up the car with as many records as they can and hit the road. They aim to sell those records all over Texas out of the trunk.
But there are some detours along the way.
He was a jokester, too.
Bob Sr. never backs down from a challenge, and his sons know it.
Dad, I bet you can't drive with your eyes closed. Oh, you don't be saying nothing like that to him. Damn, we done ran into a car. We were stuck in Florence, Arizona for 3 weeks for them to fix that brand new car.
They do eventually make it to the Lone Star State.
We stayed in Texas for a whole year, distributing down there.
And when they can't sell records in person, they rely on Pullman porters, like Dickie Lacey's grandfather. Bob Sr. isn't the only one who employs the porters, Chris says.
The porters on the Southern Pacific that came to Oakland, you see, they would be distributors of Paramount Records.
Bob Sr. maintains full creative control over the sound and arrangements on his recordings.
Most of the time, back in the day when we were recording, he'd pick out the instruments that he wanted, and we'd create the music in there in the studio. We was using full rhythm, meaning bass, drum, and piano, and guitar, and horn sections.
Remember those horns we mentioned earlier? They are the calling card of Bob Sr.'s blues sound.
We'd go in the studio and didn't have no idea what we were gonna play. You know what I'm saying? And the next thing you know, if one guy's sitting plucking on the guitar or something, he just started playing a lick. And my dad was back there in the control booth and he come like, I like that, let's build off of that.
As rock and roll hits the scene, the music evolves into the signature Oakland sound we talked about.
But as times change, Bob Sr. has a hard time keeping up.
My dad never even had a contract out of all the years he was in business with no artist. And so a lot of stuff got taken from him.
That Mercury Boogie, which really didn't get big until I happened to record Casey Douglas again.
You might remember Alan Jackson's version of that song. It rose on the country charts in 1993.
Well, if I had money, I'd tell you what I'd do. I'd go downtown, buy a Mercury or two. I'm crazy about a Mercury. Lord, I'm crazy.
And so I copywrote it in Casey's name.
Bob Sr. doesn't like that.
Bob Gedden came to Chris. Casey didn't write that song. I wrote that song for him. I said, well, Bob, why didn't you at least put your name on the record? Well, I didn't know no better back then.
If you ask Bob Jr., that sort of thing happened to his dad a lot.
I was talking to BB one day over in San Francisco. He was in town. And BB was telling me, Bob, I know your daddy wrote this song. And they done stole it from him.
BB is B.B. King. And the song is The Thrill Is Gone, one of B.B. King's biggest hits.
Thrill is gone. It's gone away for good.
My dad had wrote that song for Roy Harkin.
Here's the original version, recorded by Bob Gedden Sr. in 1951.
The thrill is gone. Gone, gone from me.
Poor Bob, I don't think he ever knew much about the publishing business and all that.
Bob Sr. is old school. He's hoping.
Well, if it makes a hit, maybe I'll get something out of it.
But Bob Jr. says that something was no more than occasional credit for the music his father wrote and recorded.
Well, the biggest money he made, no doubt, was after he died. I mean, Ford paid us $1 million for just a commercial.
For that Mercury Boogie song.
And so my dad made money in the music business, but he never got big hump checks like the way we did.
And before he dies, Bob Sr. and the blues have to deal with the rise of funk, soul, and disco.
That would probably be one of the biggest things to why he was not actually doing recording, you see, because he was a blues lover, and that's it.
As the blues falls out of favor, Bob Sr. isn't making anything off recording that music. So he has to make money some other way. even if it means getting under the hood.
The radiator repair, that was in the 70s, man.
After that, he doesn't record much. In 1991, when he's 78 years old, Bob Sr. dies of liver cancer.
I tried so hard.
By that time, the 7th Street blues scene is long gone. But how did it die?
Out of all I do, I failed instead. No matter what I do, yes, it's plain to see, I can't succeed.
The history of African American communities is that displacement starts with the freeway.
Cheryl has tracked the dispersal of African Americans in West Oakland.
I'm Cheryl Fabio, and I'm a documentary filmmaker.
Her film, Evolutionary Blues, traces the history of the Oakland Blues and its downfall, beginning with the Cypress Freeway in 1957. It connects Oakland to San Francisco until 1989, when the Loma Prieta earthquake destroys it.
The Cypress, a big, noisy wall between West Oakland and downtown, is the first in a series of urban development projects that forces thousands of Black Oaklanders out of their homes and destroys the 7th Street music scene.
The post office goes up next, but not right away. In 1960, the Postal Service demolishes 300 West Oakland homes, then maintains a giant, ugly, vacant lot that sits empty for almost a decade, before building a regional mail processing center.
Then in 1972, the Bay Area Rapid Transit System adds an elevated railway and its own distinctive sound to West Oakland, night and day.
So construction of the Cypress wiped out a certain number of homes. The post office wiped out homes. BART not only wiped out homes, but the sound is so bad in West Oakland that, it's actually...
Like Cheryl says, houses used to occupy the land where the BART station and post office are now. Homeowners don't choose to give them up.
So it's eminent domain that allowed both BART and the post office to capture that land in West Oakland.
Eminent domain is when the government says, hey, we need the land you live on. We're gonna take it. It's
for the public good, which could have been nice if the intent was to go in and to rebuild that community instead of displacing housing. But that's not what happened.
Fewer homes in the neighborhood means a lot fewer people go to the clubs and restaurants every night, and that's bad for business.
So is the sound from the trucks that pull in and out of the post office pretty much nonstop. Ronnie Stewart remembers when BART trains first start running along 7th Street.
The clubs, the ones that open back up, the bottles and stuff would shake at Esther's.
BART and the post office were the neighborhood's most visible disruptions in the late 60s and early 70s. So when you ask most people why 7th is gone today, they'll say
BART station.
Or
the post office.
Those projects didn't exist in a bubble, though. Something bigger was happening.
Because it's not just the post office and BART. It's urban renewal. It's an idea of after you've segregated a community and discarded that community, then you start pulling it back in.
When Cheryl says urban renewal, she's talking about a concept that arose out of the Great Depression. It's the theory that when a city clears out slums and replaces old buildings with new ones, the local economy will thrive again.
On paper, it sounds great, but what ends up happening in a lot of cities where poor people of color live, like Oakland, is that the city says,
well, that's the red light district, that's this, that's that, those are all bad people.
Everyone we spoke with for this episode weighed in on this.
Women had to tear down a lot of houses to get those people out of there to do that, and that they had to go somewhere else.
These cats would come in and buy you out.
They got paid something like $4,000 for their homes.
They have to shut down streets and shut down entrances into clubs.
It robs these families.
These people out here are trying to do the best they can with what they got.
So you had a lot of places to play that all of a sudden they weren't there anymore.
it took out a lot of stuff.
Well, it's part of reclaiming that land.
There were a lot of cats that depended on making money in this area.
Now, they've been displaced. They've been pushed away.
Now, you got the post office, you got the BART, it's dead.
It just disappeared as far as I'm concerned, yeah.
It couldn't be maintained. 7th Street could never be the same.
So, yeah, it affected things really bad.
And that's what destroyed West Oakland.
I try not to be a bitter person, but it's hard because it just feels like every opportunity working class people get, there's some external reason that becomes an internal problem, and it devastates internally.
It's sad. It's really sad, you know, because where do you go? These were black-owned clubs, so the black clubs catered to the black music. Blues, R&B, jazz. When they left, all that died. So that's the sad thing.
I've been standing here thinking just what my baby takes me to be.
Some of the folks we spoke with mentioned that blues was on its way out anyway, because of disco and funk. They said that even without BART, the post office, and urban renewal, the 7th Street scene still would have faded. I asked Dickie Lacey.
Do you think that there's something to that? Do you think that blues would have faded even if those things hadn't come in?
Well, it's possible, but I don't know. It's you know, I don't know. When things change, sometimes you have to change with it. With people changing into different forms of music, it's, you know, that's what they call progress. I don't know if that's progress.
Oakland has been through a lot since the 7th Street heyday.
The rise of feminism and the Black Panthers, funk and soul music, hip-hop, the crack epidemic, and today,
Oakland has become one of the hottest rental markets in the Bay Area.
As gentrification transforms the neighborhood, the people who have long called it home are getting pushed out.
For some, this is a story about progress and community investment. For others, it's an ongoing story about gentrification.
Has gentrification changed your neighborhood?
People are talking about gentrification.
The issue of gentrification.
Gentrification. Gentrification.
Gentrification.
Gentrification.
It's the hot button word of the decade.
that's why we feel it's important to mention our own part in the gentrification of Oakland.
Chloe and I moved to Oakland 10 years ago. We lived in cars and slept on couches when we got here. The recession had just hit when I arrived, and it was in full swing when Chloe showed up.
We couldn't find work. We were broke.
Things are better now, but even today, we share a house with 4 other roommates to afford the rent. So we're not the typical face of gentrification.
Neither of us drives a Tesla. We bike everywhere.
But we have contributed to the new face of West Oakland.
Even though we aren't rich transplants, we're still pretty new to the neighborhood, and we're white.
The mere presence of new white faces encourages other whites to the neighborhood. Prices go up, more non-white people get pushed out, and many of them end up living under the freeway.
Even recession-era transplants like Brian and I wonder how long we'll be able to afford to live here.
Though the 7th Street blues scene died out long before we arrived, there's still music in West Oakland. Until recently, there were basement punk shows and backyard hip-hop concerts across the neighborhood, and we were part of that scene.
Today, you'll have a hard time finding a living room show in the neighborhood. Nobody wants a noise complaint. If their landlords hear about it, they could be house hunting again by the end of the month.
Another wave of the West Oakland music scene has come and gone. Chloe and I feel partially responsible.
But no one wants to sit by and watch music disappear from the neighborhood. And some of the old school musicians who played 7th Street are still rocking out today.
Like Ronnie Stewart.
Ronnie preserves the blues by playing with his band every Saturday at a local barbecue joint. He's worked for years with the city of Oakland to install sidewalk plaques that commemorate 7th Street blues heroes. He calls it
the music they played on 7th Street, Oakland Walk of Fame.
In 2012, the city installed the first plaques in the sidewalk in front of the West Oakland BART station. Each carries the name of someone who played 7th Street. Ronnie plans to place more in front of Esther's Orbit Room. It's the only club building still standing on 7th. Esther's closed down in 2009.
You can catch the Larry Van Band playing in other parts of Oakland. And he teaches private music lessons to young kids, too.
I just love teaching them, sharing with them the knowledge I have, and making them feel good about themselves.
Cheryl shows her documentary at film festivals around the country and on Oakland's public access TV channel, KTOP.
Dickie lives in Richmond, California with his wife and son. He doesn't play in public anymore, but he can still blow.
Other sounds have overtaken the popularity of West Oakland blues, but its spirit hangs on.
Solidarity, forged from racism, dispossession, and displacement, plus the unique flavor that Oakland adds to everything, lives on through hip-hop.
This is Spiritual Soulja by Dickie's nephew Ken Cummings. Hip-hop artists are still scraping for money, respect, and love the way their forebears did.
7th Street may be a different place today, but the people of this city continue to adapt, no matter what the system throws at them. That perseverance draws from the blues.
America's only true contribution to the world of culture, we don't have symphonies, we don't have Beethoven, Bach, is blues, jazz, and gospel.
It's the root of the different forms of American music. It's the foundation of everything. And by understanding that, you can really go anywhere.
Hey listeners, if you enjoy the music you've heard on this episode, you should know that much of it was made possible by our friends at JSP Records.
Since 1977, JSP Records has kept the spirit of the blues alive by bringing American blues artists and their music to the UK for concerts, tours, and recording sessions.
JSP pioneered the high-quality remastering technique for vintage recordings and revolutionized the reissue market with affordable box sets of complete recordings or key sessions of legendary artists like Charlie Patton, Django Reinhardt, Fats Waller, and the Bob Geddens Legacy featured on this episode.
You can check out their catalog and purchase original recordings and stunning box set reissues on their website at jsprecords.com. In the next episode of Beats and Measures, we'll take a look at an often overlooked Bay Area community and its musical traditions.
Buskers, street musicians who play their hearts out for handouts.
And it hasn't been easy. Some days I can make some actual money, and the rest of the time I make enough to sort of get by.
And some of their personal hardships.
What was your parents' reaction like when you came out?
Well, I don't think my dad was shocked. I think he was depressed, but I just don't relate to the world in the same way that you think I should.
What way was that?
You know, being raised as a male.
That's on the next episode of Beats and Measures.
Thanks for listening to our first episode. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to our channel and rate us on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app. It helps us a lot.
Beats and Measures is a production of Studio to Be in Oakland, California.
Executive producers are Joaquin Alvarado, Ken Ikeda, and Kristen Belden.
Edited by Cheryl Duvall.
William Sammons is our sound engineer.
And an extra special thanks to Christina Loring for everything.
This podcast was created by your hosts, Brian Howie and myself, Chloe Behrens.
JSP Records, Boot House of Tunes, Third Side Music, Ronnie Stewart's Caravan of All-Stars, the Larry Van Band, and Ken Cummings provided music for this episode.
Thanks to Classic Cars West in Oakland for letting us record the cool sounds of your vintage rides. And to the Greasy Gills and Stanley Behrens for helping us build the West Oakland sound.
To Sarah Carpenter for the Studio to Be shout-out.
And to Abby Larson from Baywar and Cheryl Fabio. Lowell Fulson takes us out of this episode with Prison Bound.
Goodbye, everybody. I must leave my baby behind. Now, goodbye, goodbye, everybody. I must leave my baby behind. The jury found me guilty, and the judge said I must do some time. Well, my burden is heavy, and my heart is feeling low. My burdens is heavy, and my heart is feeling low. Well, I'll be in this old prison till my hair turns white as snow. To go. You can quit me, baby. This prison you don't have to go. But I love my little baby. I want the whole world to know.
Not always. I mean, yeah, everybody, you know, my dog didn't bit me and my woman took my pants and some. Yeah. You know, I mean, that.